In a moment when free expression feels more contested than at any time in modern American life, our guest today is sounding the alarm and offering a path forward. From campus speech fights to political pressure on the press to the chaos of digital misinformation, he's written a book arguing that the guardrails of the First Amendment are bending in ways many Americans barely recognize. Hello, I'm Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. This is E&P Reports, our weekly vodcast spotlighting the critical conversations that shape the survival and sustainability of the free press. From First Amendment issues to new revenue models, we dig deep with the leaders who are keeping journalism alive, thriving, and fiercely independent. Stuart N. Brotman is an internationally recognized scholar of First Amendment law, media policy, and communications regulation with a career that has spanned the White House, the Department of State, Harvard Law School, MIT, Columbia Journalism School, the Aspen Institute, and leading global media organizations. He has served in four presidential administrations, helped shape federal policy in telecommunications, satellites, cellular, and digital media, and advised journalists, diplomats, lawmakers, and industry leaders worldwide. But his real claim to fame, if I may be so bold, Stuart, is actually publishing op-eds for E&P Magazine. That must just be I'm kidding, but I mean, with so many influential media leaders like you choosing platforms like Substack, and me watching every click and share, when you speak and let us amplify your voice, thank you. We're getting a lot of engagement, and thank you for choosing E&P. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, and I am a big fan of E&P, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Stuart will break down what he calls the real-time threats to free expression. Everything from political interference to platform algorithms, and explain why the next few years may be decisive for the future of a free press and an informed public. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Walter Hussman. Our family has been in the news business for over 100 years. Journalism includes two parts: reporting the news and providing opinions. But in recent years, there's been too much opinion appearing in news reporting. This has eroded public trust in news reporting to the lowest level of any U.S. institution. To address this, we started a nonprofit, the Center for Integrity in News Reporting.
The Center for Integrity in News Reporting, CFINR, is on a mission to rebuild public trust in journalism, one newsroom and one classroom at a time. We champion the effort to have news organizations and journalism schools create and prominently display their own clear, concise statements of core journalistic values. Learn more by visiting the Center for Integrity in News Reporting site at cfinr.org.
All right, Stuart, what made this the moment to write Free Expression Under Fire? What changed in the landscape? What pushed you to say, this can't wait, I'm publishing now?
Well, looking ahead, 2016 is the 250th anniversary of our independence. As you know, the Declaration of Independence was July 4th, 1776. So we'll be celebrating our 250th year. What's interesting, though, is it's just the beginning of the journey to the First Amendment. So as you know, the First Amendment was not enacted until 16 years later. Obviously, James Madison had a major role to play, as well as other founding fathers. And so I thought this would be really the opportune time for us to reflect collectively and as a country about this journey from independence to protecting the individual freedom of the First Amendment.
All right, but you start the book with your early life in a New Jersey high school newsroom. How did this formative experience shape the way you think about free expression today? That's quite a journey, sir.
Well, very, very much so. So I started as a high school journalist, like many high school students. And at the time, I had two wonderful advisors in high school who essentially said, we are there to protect your ability to report and to get news and let other students know about it. So I grew up at a time when there was a lot of turmoil in the country. There was the anti-war movement. There was the beginning of the drug culture. And certainly students were very interested in knowing about that. Certainly the high school administration was not terribly interested in having students publish articles about that. So one thing I really got from that was the protection of the advisors I had in terms of essentially giving us the permission and the freedom to report. We didn't know very much about the First Amendment at that point, but we certainly learned about a freedom to report and what a free press meant at that point. And certainly that stayed with me and has stayed with me all of my career.
All right, so let's move on to the book. You catalog dozens of real-time threats, and we only have 20 minutes for this program. Which ones, in your view, should news publishers, your audience right now, be most alarmed about this very moment?
Well, obviously, the protection of confidential sources. So we still do not have a federal law that protects confidential sources. And obviously, we have a continuing controversy with various reporters and editors who were brought before grand juries and elsewhere to testify. They have very little legal ability to protect those sources. So one free press challenge certainly would be a lack of having federal protection for confidential sources.
I want to circle back to when you mentioned the First Amendment and your academia background. What's the greatest public misunderstanding you feel there is about the perception? What is the First Amendment, and how does that fuel the conflict that you're seeing today and writing about?
I think the main conflict, or at least misperception, is that the First Amendment is really a barrier between government and the citizens of the United States. And so what the First Amendment was intended to do and does do is protect citizens from having the government interfere with free press and free speech. It doesn't give citizens a general right to free speech or a general right to free press, but it's a protection of free speech and free press from the government. And that barrier essentially must be a firm and high barrier.
Amen. And it's being tested all the time. Okay, so let's talk about the political atmosphere. How do you see political actors, federal, state, or even local, reshaping these boundaries as we speak on press freedom? What should we be looking for?
We've seen a lot in the press access area, and obviously that's quite troubling. We've seen limitations, for example, in the Pentagon, where press access now is being restricted to reporters who agree in advance to have their stories cleared. So press access has been an issue. We saw the issue dealing with the Associated Press, where the Associated Press was essentially denied its full press access because it did not agree to change the terminology of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And so issues like that, I think, are quite troubling in terms of general press access. Again, that is squarely within the First Amendment because it's the government erecting a barrier to freedom of the press.
Amazing. Okay, so let's get nerdy for a second. You touch on technology in the book, and you do a great job. You've written extensively about social media's impact on speech. What do you see as the most dangerous fault line as these social media platforms continue to evolve and become the amplifier of news?
Part of it is that these are really not covered by the First Amendment. And again, the First Amendment is essentially creating a barrier between government and citizens. Social media are private companies. And so social media certainly has the ability to restrict or channel different types of speech. So I think many people believe that social media is a public square, a public forum. It's not really a public forum. It's a private forum. And certainly when we choose to join social media, we are accepting the terms of that public media. I think one of the main issues here is transparency, because I think a lot of people don't understand that. And I think a lot of people may not accept the terms if they understood what they were.
All right, so let's stay in the nerdy world and let's layer above social media, which has been around for a while, AI. which is much more recent. AI generated contact and algorithmic filtering now sit between audiences and verified reporting. You've got to agree on that. So, what does this mean for free expression and for trying to regain? I'm going to say regain, I know I'm editorializing here, but regaining public trust.
Well, I think AI, again, will be a situation where we have private companies that are involved in setting the rules or setting the landscape. I think one of the critical aspects of algorithmic, let's call it discrimination, is that, again, people are not aware of it, or certainly are not in the position to decide they would want to have one system over another. So transparency is really important here. And at this point, we have very little transparency in terms of understanding what's happening with some of the algorithms.
Well, let's look at the people in charge, or supposedly lawmakers, regulators. Are we flying blind? Do they even understand, in your opinion, what the hell's going on right now and the impact this has? Or are we just making decisions without truly understanding the impact of AI?
Well, unfortunately, I think we are flying a bit blind. So about 20 years ago, Congress abolished something called the Office of Technology Assessment. So for many years, just like we have a Office of Congressional Budget, we had an office within Congress, which essentially had staff people who evaluated the development of new technologies and advised Congress about it. Congress abolished that office about 20 years ago. It only took up about $100 million of our budget. So it was not a major budget item. And I think since we've had the abolishment of the Office of Technology and Assessment, we essentially have said we are not interested in knowing how all of these technologies are developing. And certainly, again, that's contributing to this idea of flying blind.
All right, so let's move on to your academia again and the environment you have lived in. Several of your chapters examine campus speech battles. What lessons should our audience, news publishers, take from what's happening within the academic world right now in the next generation that you teach and you live with?
I wish I could be a little more optimistic in terms of what's happening in academia. Certainly from the student standpoint, and we see this reflected in surveys, students really don't have a good grasp of the First Amendment or the notion of free speech or free press. And so now about a third of students, and again, this is nationwide, believe that violence should be used to suppress speech. That's quite an alarming statistic when you look at that across the country. And we've seen, obviously, a number of speakers who are brought to campus who are shut down. Some are even shut down through violent means. Some of the speakers are actually attacked or threatened. And that's a very dangerous situation.
We've been doing a lot of reporting on public trust. You and I we had some discussions on it around the book, but now I want you to get to 50,000 feet for me on this. Although when we discuss trust in media, many paint it with a very broad brush, including CNN, MS Now. I have to go to the new brand, Fox News with local media. It turns out when you separate those, you get local media having higher trust in the 50s and 60s as compared to the national brands. But you're talking to those local publishers now. That's the meat and potatoes of the E&P audience. Are you hopeful? Can we rebuild that trust to where it was 20 years ago? And if so, what steps do you want this audience to take now to help rebuild that trust with the public?
I am hopeful, and I think one of the messages of the book is a level of optimism, because I think we can reach a level of common ground regardless of our partisan divide at this point. And I think obviously local media is essentially a breeding environment for having that common ground, because you can create community conversations around that. So I think local media has a really important role to play. One of it, obviously, is what we call civics education. And civics education is now coming back. Many states now are essentially having new requirements for civics education. But that's in a formal sense. I think local media has a very interesting role to play in an informal way, because local media teaches us how to live in our communities, how to be good citizens. And there, I think they will be tremendous movers of informal civic education, which could be very powerful in this area.
Funny you would bring that up, or not funny, but that's a lot of the reporting we're doing right now about how some media companies, and these companies are moving forward with audience and advertising revenue, who do engage with their readers at events. They bring in authors, or they host civic leaders, and it's happening more and more. And you close the book with recommendations for citizens. We only have a few minutes left, but can you give us the quick cliff notes on that? What are those recommendations you cover in the book? And maybe some of our publishers can take that home and help use that in their own local communities.
Well, I have a few examples. One example, obviously, is when we go to the baseball game, or we go to a football game or a basketball game, we all stand up, we do the Star Spangled Banner. What if the announcer said, let's please rise and recite the First Amendment? And on the Jumbotron, you would have the 45 words of the First Amendment. And that would be a very powerful message. It would also be a way to link this idea of why we're even having the Star Spangled Banner, but the First Amendment essentially gives us the ability to do so. So I think part of it is for those 45 words to really become part of our natural language. And sporting events are a great way to do that. When we go to the movie theater, it would be great, instead of, or in addition to have the commercials come on before, let's have Tom Cruise or someone come on and say, welcome to the theater. You're going to be watching some incredible cinema today. And the reason is because of the First Amendment. And then flash on those 45 words. I think local publishers can essentially help reinforce that. What if every local publisher essentially paid to have a banner put in the public library of their community with the words of the First Amendment, and put the name of the newspaper next to that? That would be a powerful message that essentially says, here's what we live for, and here is an organization that supports it.
Stuart N. Brotman, the book is Free Expression Under Fire. You'll find it everywhere. You can just search for Stuart or search for the book. And of course you can come back to the landing page. We have a link to it as well. Stuart, internationally recognized scholar of First Amendment law, media policy, communications regulation, 4 White House administrations, Harvard Law School, MIT. I could go on. But most importantly, a voice, one of EMP's voices, if I may brag, to have you using our platform. Thank you, Stuart, for your time. The book's a great read. We appreciate you being part of the program.
Good. Thanks so much. Great being here, Mike.